Come with me to get sued by a creditor.
I ignored a debt collector and they sent it to a law firm to sue me.
Capital One will take you to court.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Make Gains. Today we're going to be talking about people being sued for credit card debt. Let's get into it.
Come with me to get sued by a creditor. Okay, so my court date, my court time is at 9:30. I'm here at 8:30, just in case they want to get slick and do some weird. The girl is here on time, earlier than ever. So I can't tell y'all who's suing me right now, but I'll tell y'all when I come out the results, what happens and what the judgment is. But listen, when these creditors come for me talking about I owe them something, prove it in court.
They can and they will prove it in court. You can't just run and hide from these folks. Don't think you can just get off because you go to court.
What's up, guys? Let me give y'all a story about what happened today. I'm home this morning drinking my coffee. I get a knock on the door and it's the sheriff from the courthouse that came here to serve me some paperwork because Credit One is suing me for an old debt from 2021. Who would have thought that credit cards are suing people now for an old debt? That's never happened before, to me at least. And I literally got served and they're telling me I have 30 days to get in contact with them and make an arrangement. Let me show you guys. This is the first time I hear about a credit card company suing anyone, like, especially from like 2021. Never in my life heard of it. I had 2 credit cards with them. I was paying it, got behind, and now all of a sudden I get this.
These credit card companies are not playing around. People think that you can just put off debt indefinitely and then nothing's ever going to happen from that, but that is not the case. We're seeing credit card companies suing people, and we're not just talking about tens of thousands of dollars. We're talking about sub-$1,000 debts for many of these. This is happening right now just for a few $100s. So don't think that you can just avoid paying forever and nothing's ever going to happen from that.
I got sued by a debt collector, and I thought the chances of that happening were like slim to none. It was only $1,000.
That is rare for someone to go full legal route for $1,000, I'll be honest.
I settled for 80% of what I owe.
$800 is not an inconsequential amount of money, but if we're talking debt, if we're talking legal consequences, definitely not the worst.
Yeah, so just because you stop paying does not mean that your debt is going to disappear. There is a statute of limitations on that, and it's not always really straightforward. Depending on where you live will make a big difference in that. But the statute of limitations ranges from 3 to 10 years, with a lot of states in the middle, around 4 to 6 years. But here's the interesting thing. If you make a payment, you're acknowledging that you have debt, and that resets that statute of limitations. So be careful about that, but the most important thing is that if you're making gains, you're going to pay back people you owe money to because you have integrity and that's the right thing to do. So, start out by not borrowing money that you can't pay back, okay? Especially with the credit cards. If you can't pay it off at the end of the month, you should not be going into credit card debt because the interest is so high. And then if you forget to make a payment, it's going to go up even more, which makes it next to impossible to pay back if you don't have the money, right? So you're not going to be able to just pay the minimum payment and pay it back. It will take you forever. Don't get into this situation by not using a credit card unless you have the money to pay it off at the end of the month.
Asking for a friend, what happens when you get sued by a credit card company? What should you do? Should you get an attorney? Should you pay them back? Should you try to settle? Should you try to contact the credit card company? What happens if you owe other credit card companies? Should you try to figure out a payment arrangement even though you can't pay for anything right now because everything is so expensive? Asking for a friend.
So we're going to get into that. These next videos really go into what to do. The big thing is you cannot just ignore it. You can't put your head in the sand. It's not going to go away.
If you are being sued by a credit card company, or rather a debt collector acting on the behalf of a credit card company, listen up real quick so you don't make the same idiot, silly goose mistakes I made today. You're gonna get a bunch of things in the mail. It is important that when an officer comes to your home and gives you a summons, like a request to show up in court, that is when your timeline, your deadline, this goes for a lot of court shit too, okay? As soon as you get a summons, you have a week or two. You need to check your laws, and it literally will say on the paper, respond to the summons. You need to file a piece of paperwork. You need to call the courthouse, call the clerk, and ask questions. And you, even if you get a date for court and you think, I can just show up for my court date. No, you can't. You have to submit your answer before even going into court. I did not know this, and I did not read enough words on the important papers they gave me to know ahead of time. So I'm hoping this helps maybe one person.
You got to read the words, folks. It's important, especially when you get a legal summons. You may need to respond to that summons, so be sure to read that and follow the instructions. And if you have questions, you can call the clerk of court and they can help you.
Capital One will take you to court. Guys, Capital One is known one of the biggest credit card companies that will take you to court, and this happens when you take too long to pay a collection. The reason this happens is the client will get multiple collection letter companies from a third party, and when they don't respond after a few months or years, they end up taking the client to court. How do you stop this? Once you get a pre-trial letter from that company, you want to call and negotiate for 50% of the amount due. This is going to help you save money and also requesting a pay per delete. We help clients all over the United States negotiate things like this, stops them from going to court, also saves them money and time, and it helps fix their credit.
Yeah, so this guy works for a company that does that for you, so you can hire a company to do it. I don't think you need to. If you're in a position where you're getting sued by a credit card company, it's already hit your credit report. So you've already hurt your credit, but yes, you can negotiate that debt, call the number like you said, and just plan on offering a lower number and working your way up to 50%. Don't start at 50%. They're going to say, no, pay me 80%. So start low. Tell them you can afford to give them 20% and then move up from there. That's a good tip for anytime you're negotiating. Start a little lower than where you want to be, and that gives you some wiggle room.
Hey, if you have Capital One or Discover debt, this is something you need to know. If you're going through a debt resolution program or plan to be on a debt resolution program, if you have Capital One or Discover, you will be sued in civil court. I was told 100% of cases that are trying to be resolved or settled with Capital One or Discover are being sued civilly. If you are in a creditor-friendly state, that means the state is more likely to side with the creditor. If you're in a debtor-friendly state, vice versa. If you're in a creditor-friendly state, they have the option to keep pushing, and not settle your debt. The most common repercussion of that is a garnishment of wages by 25%. If you have two creditors do that, that is 50% of your wages before taxes. This is something I was not informed of when I began the debt resolution program, and is something that I feel like people should probably know. So wish me luck, boy, I'm going to court.
Enrolling in a debt resolution program doesn't guarantee anything. It's just a negotiation process. The important thing to take away from this is that if they go to court and the court decides they want to garnish your wages, they can take, you just heard that, up to 50% of your wages, which is a lot of money. If they're automatically taking 50% of your wages before tax, that's a bad situation to be in. You do not want to be in this situation because you just chose to ignore your debts. All right. So like I said before, do the right thing, try to pay it off. And if for whatever reason you can't, then you do need to be negotiating with these folks, because the last thing you want to have happen is to get sued and then all of a sudden you're losing half your paycheck because you had several credit cards where you just ignored them and figured that eventually they'd go away, which they may or may not. So you're rolling the dice whenever you do that. But it sounds like in this day and age, many are not going away.
Here's what happens when you just pay the minimum balance on your credit card because the interest accumulates. Let's say that your credit limit is $1,000, which I know is pretty low, but this is where the bank is testing you, right? To see if you can handle that $1,000. In this situation, let's just say you spend $500 this month because that's just your living expenses and you are only able to pay the minimum balance. Minimum balance is usually $10 or 2% of your balance, whichever is less. So you make that payment of $10. Now your interest accruing balance is $490. To know how much interest you're going to be paying, we're going to start with the due date until the next due date, which is usually 30 days. So this is $490 times 30 days divided by 365, and the interest rate on credit cards is usually 21%, so that's what I'm going to use. And when you calculate this, that is the interest that you're accumulating for the 30 days that you've just paid the minimum balance on. Now the next month, say that you spent another $500 and you're only able to make the minimum payment again. An interest accruing balance of $490 plus $490 that you spent last month and the interest that you've accrued the last 30 days. If you add that up times the next 30 days until your next due date divided by 365 times 21%, that is the interest that you're going to accumulate just by paying the minimum balance for 2 months. On top of that, since you're now close to your limit, you're going to be charged an over limit fee. This is usually $29 and max out your credit card. So make sure you understand what happens when you only pay the minimum balance because there are consequences because interest.
Yeah, that interest will get you. And so if you're only making the minimum payment, especially like what she said here, if you spend up to your credit card limit and you're only making the minimum payment, it's easy for that interest to hit you, put you over the top. And then now you're like she said, you've got fees, you've still got interest coming every month, and you don't escape that, guys, just making the minimum payment. So if you're just paying $10 on $1,000 and your interest is more than that, then all you're doing is accruing interest, accruing interest, accruing interest. And guess what? If you can make an investment and guarantee 21% returns on that investment, would you do it? Would you make that investment? And I think for most people, the answer is absolutely. This is the opposite of that. Okay? You are allowing that company to have an investment where they're making 21%. Don't allow that to happen. Pay off those cars at the end of every month. And that way you're not paying 21% because that's really how you make gains. You make gains through interest, but you don't want to be paying interest. You want to be earning interest. That is where whenever you start investing, you can really start compounding growth, make money, and be able to retire someday. The key here is you do not allow yourself to get in these situations with credit cards. So hopefully somebody watching this can see this situation and learn from it and know that this is not a good place to be. I hope that you're able to take something away from this video. If it was helpful, please give it a like and a subscribe. Also, feel free to share this with your friends who might need to know that this is happening. Until next time.